Yeah, I'm sorry. You don't just get to punch Nazis, okay? Just because you disagree with them. It's not okay. You can't escalate like that.
It's not an escalation if what they're doing is violence, and what they're doing is violence. Holding the beliefs that they hold is violence. To quote Sam Harris, there's some beliefs so awful that you should kill people just for holding them.
If you want to have a civil conversation, you want to talk about issues and say, you know, these ideas are weak. You know, they're vulnerable to attacks based on the quality of the ideas. Their ideas are frankly shoddy. You don't need to punch them over that. That only empowers them, gives them a larger platform.
But it's... no, you're wrong. It makes them scared. It makes them less powerful. It makes people laugh at them, you know, like they would laugh at one of the newest episodes of The Simpsons. It turns them into a big joke.
But it lets them rally their troops. They've got this, this victim complex. They can put forward this image. Oh, poor me. I'm just sharing my ideas. I get punched in the face.
Nobody's buying
rallying. That. They are buying. Look at the sections of the internet with these people, and
there's like 1,000 of them. 1,000 neo. They're completely irrelevant. The people who agree with that, what you're saying, are completely irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant if you're attacked by some of these guys who think that they're acting in self-defense because of some
Start
naive
carrying
kid
a knife. This is a point of solidarity among the left. This is how we band together and win the battle against Nazis.
That is ridiculous. You know, that's such a funny joke. It belongs in between season 11 and season 13 of The Simpsons, which were the best seasons.
Season 11 and season 13 were the 15th or 16th best seasons. The best season is the
Okay, well, you're just showing how little
season.
you understand The Simpsons chronology. Because, yeah, season 11, 12, 13, that was the peak. That's when Simpsons really came into its own.
Well, I mean, Simpsons was coming into its own at that time, and it's continued to come into its own over the course of the next 15 years.
Talking about? Okay, first of all, we could punch Nazis.
Yeah,
just
we can punch Nazis
everywhere you go.
Well, I mean, if you're close enough to them, and you know for sure they're a Nazi.
And what's the definition of a Nazi specifically? I mean, like... hard Nazis, National Socialists, or anyone who reminds you of a Nazi?
Well, it's not about reminding, and you can tell who's a Nazi by talking to them and what things they talk about. White nationalists are Nazis. Richard Spencer is a Nazi. People who don't understand that the newest episodes of The Simpsons are the best. Like, did you see last week's episode? It was the best ever.
I did. I saw it, and I thought it was really downhill from especially the peak of seasons 11, 12, and 13.
No. Nobody thinks that. Everyone, like, last episode was the best.
This is an example.
The one before that was
What, you're gonna punch me in the
best.
face over this because I've got a different point of view than you?
I mean, if you're going to continue pushing this Nazi propaganda of seasons 11, 12, and 13 were the best.
It's an innocuous difference of opinion.
That The Simpsons is not the best it's ever been right now. You think that's innocuous? This has real
and it peaked between 11, 12, and
consequences.
13.
People are going to get hurt thinking that.
Well, I respect your right to express your opinion on The Simpsons, and I will not punch you because...
Well, because I'm right.
No, that's not really what usually decides whether or not someone punches someone. What usually decides it is whether or not they're just completely reactive and childish.
Welcome to What to Think, everyone. Seriously Wrong podcast.
Yeah, this is the podcast. Welcome back.
It's a perfect, holy source of the opinions of two Canadians who are sympathetic to communism and liberalism, so that there's something for everyone there to dislike.
Also sympathetic to anarchism, to libertarianism. We're sympathetic broadly to the notion of like compassion, dialogue, difference. Don't like Nazis. The compassion doesn't go that far. We've been pretty consistent about that. I have some
compassion for them. There's some, what's that? Unconditional
positive regard.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something like, if you imagine baby Hitler, we talk about potentially killing baby Hitler, but it's a tragic story to look at a baby, this sweet, pure little
kill
thing.
Teenage Hitler.
It's just like,
or like 20-year-old Hitler.
This helpless little thing. And it's so sweet, and it needs to be held in order to be safe, and it needs food, and it needs its mother, and it's like then transforming over the course of a lifetime into genocidal dictator. That is tragic.
Yeah, no, definitely.
That's a fucking Anakin Skywalker story, but without the redemption at the end. Flapping in the wind.
You. Yeah, so it's been a crazy Donald Trump heavy week. Having trouble like keeping up with all the things that Donald Trump has been doing.
Yeah.
Since being sworn into office on Friday, Donald Trump has been busy signing many executive orders, including the freezing of all regulations currently in the process of being approved, and a complete freeze on any federal hiring. The formal withdrawal of the United States from TPP negotiations. The United States wasn't part of the TPP yet, but they're definitely not going to be now. So that's just dead, which is something I think many leftist people are pretty grudgingly happy about.
Yeah, because the TPP deals with like intellectual property and stuff like that. It's like a international investor protection agreement. I think the way that the TPP works, if I remember correctly, is that there's a certain promise of continued profitability, and if it doesn't happen, governments might end up having to pay private corporations money to make up for the money that they didn't make.
Oh wow!
So it's like the Noam Chomsky called it an investor protection agreement more than a trade agreement. A trade agreement. So that aspect of it is very bad, but it's unclear that the Trump Republican administration is going to want to put something out there in its place that legitimately benefits the people who were negatively affected by the previous incarnation. Yeah,
that it's going to be better, that his great deal to replace the TPP is going to be any better on intellectual property rights or the stuff you're talking about. Or something I just learned when I was commenting about this on Facebook, that there's provisions in TPP, and this also exists in NAFTA, so it's also still in effect, but that these regulations that exist in some senses like supersede federal governments, and they have these corporate super courts that exist to adjudicate violations of the trade agreements. So if I think companies, I don't know about individuals, found themselves in violation of the TPP or NAFTA, they can be taken to a non-governmental corporate run court that has greater authority to punish them than it's like the judicial system of the country that you happen to live in. He also issued an order preventing federal dollars from being given to any international organization that provides abortion services, an order asking agencies to waive any requirements of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare, possible to the maximum extent permitted by law. A lot of these are just like signaling games, but they have some minor effect. Orders speeding the approval of the Dakota Access and Keystone Oil pipelines, as well as an order stipulating that the pipelines be built with American steel, quote, to the maximum extent possible. He issued an order asking agencies to increase enforcement on immigration policy, specifically prioritizing the deportation of anyone charged or convicted or charged with a crime who has misrepresented themselves to the government, abused a welfare program, or has an existing deportation order. And that order also included the hiring of 10,000 more immigrations and customs enforcement agents subject to funding, allowing local law enforcement officers to act as immigration officers, the blocking of federal grants to sanctuary cities, that's any cities who don't enforce the immigration laws. There's certain cities who have just basically said, we don't enforce immigration laws, come here, we're cool. So he's going to block funding or federal grants to those cities. And also, he wants to publish a weekly list of all crimes committed by immigrants. His administration is setting that up.
So just wait, anyone who's born in another country?
I think
like
maybe
illegal immigrants,
illegal immigrants. I'd have to double check that.
I mean, either case is kind of a rough policy, but if it was just anyone who was born outside of the country, that would be particularly outrageous.
The actual wording of the order is to make public a comprehensive list of criminal actions committed by aliens. I don't know if aliens is a technical term for only illegal immigrants.
Yeah, I think it's got to be illegal. You're not called an alien anymore if you're...
This independent article says it does not specify that only crimes committed by illegal immigrants should be included, raising the prospect of offenses committed by any immigrant being published, even if the person is living in the U.S. legally. So I think it's unclear. The headline just says immigrants, but I think it's likely that it will probably just be illegal immigrants.
Unless the crime's really bad and they like really want to show it off.
Yeah. But so it's just like if leftists, for example, were to start a website making a list publishing all crimes committed by white people or all crimes committed by men or something like that. It was just like
all crimes committed by 22-year-olds. 22-year-olds are such a scourge. Look at all this cherry-picked.
Yeah, you could just select any demographic, list all the crimes that they've committed, and then make it sound scary.
Also, it just jump back. Executive orders to halt the development of new regulations in general.
Yeah, any new regulation that was like in the process of coming into effect is put on hold until it gets a specific approval from him or someone in his administration. And also, no agencies can fill any vacancies that currently exist or create any new positions. It just nobody can hire anyone in the federal government right now.
Oh yeah, the big government thing is so fucking nutty because like the tiny bit of truth in the narrative of like big government is bad is they feed on this feeling of encountering bureaucracy. Like when you encounter bureaucracy and there's some sort of red tape that prevents you from doing something, or you need to fill out like an extra form, or like your form gets denied, all that stuff, like it's emotionally a negative experience. So they've branded that as big government. And then because they've branded that lived experience that a lot of people have as big government, there's this intuitive emotional pull towards this idea that the government should be as small as possible and that there should be less regulations. But even though that's like a completely incoherent political objective to have less regulations in general, like it doesn't, any attempt to remove regulations is inherently making a new regulation to free up space from like
to undo the previous regulation. And also like a lot of these, like specifically the thing you're talking about, say like you're frustrated that you go to the DMV and it takes a really long time and it's inefficient. One way to make it more efficient might be to hire a whole bunch of new DMV agents and open new DMV offices and
get those lines shorter.
Yeah, like train the people better, hire some people to train them.
Hire some people to review the overview of the organization, what's working and what's not, and optimize it from like the perspective of a...
Yeah, just like not hiring more people isn't necessarily going to make anyone's experience of dealing with the government any better.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not at all.
He also, this was the last order that I had, issued an order stating that it's an immediate priority to begin planning and accruing funding for the wall, for the border wall along Mexican border. There was also a draft of order that hasn't been passed and that the White House has denied any part in authoring that would have lifted Obama's ban on secret prisons abroad, like Guantanamo, and also lifting the banning on there's currently a ban on any interrogation technique that isn't in a specific handbook. So it would lift that ban. So while torture is still illegal, things like waterboarding, it's up to people's discretion whether that is considered torture. Right now it's illegal because it's not specifically in this handbook of approved techniques. But what this order that the Trump administration is denying having anything to do with would be remove that restriction of having to use these approved techniques of interrogation only.
I remember seeing something during the confirmation hearings for Mike Pompeo, who is
CIA. Is that what he's for?
Yeah. I think he was nominated for CIA director. When he was asked about torture and stuff, he left the door open to. His basic point was like, we want to have the most effective techniques, and if evidence comes out that these alternative techniques are more effective, then we should consider including them. Even if it's not something that actually happens in practice, like even if they don't start or continue, I don't know,
recontinue, reconvene,
these types of torture that they've mostly seeming to have stopped, as opposed to the types of torture that they've continued doing, like solitary confinement and
approved interrogation techniques that are basically still torturous.
Even if nothing comes of this, the whole discussion around it and putting having the president talk positively during the campaign about the idea of torture and stuff, it's a mode of psychological terrorism on the entire planet to make sure that everyone around the world knows that there's extremely severe risks for standing up against authority, for standing up against
American power.
Yeah, but not just American power, but whatever your local power is. I think they partially set the tone of the way that other repressive authoritarian states see what is acceptable and what is not.
Right. Yeah. No, totally.
And the people who are most affected by something like torture being normalized are, individualist leftists with big mouths and organizations that directly confront power structure and their members.
Yeah, you mean around the world in places where they're being actively repressed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are groups that I would like to see flourish personally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. So yeah, Trump has been fulfilling a lot of his promises, a lot more than a lot of politicians tend to do.
Well, but it's not even these executive orders. It's a theatrical fulfilling of promises.
Yeah, you got to see how they actually play out. Some of them have more actual real world impact than others. Some of them need real legislation to be passed before anything's going to really come of it. Like building the border wall. There's right now $200,000 of funding that he's able to just direct right now. Yes, start doing it. Or maybe it's $200 million. I think $200 million, but it would cost 13 to 50 billion to actually build the whole wall, depending on who you ask. So they're going to need some real funding. We'll see if Mexico pays for it. But one promise that he could do with an executive order fairly easily that he has not done, that he promised to do on day one, was a 5-year ban of executive branch officials becoming lobbyists after leaving the administration, and a lifetime ban on them lobbying for foreign governments. That's a promise that he repeatedly made, that was made during the transition period after he won the election, that hasn't dropped down the pipe with all his other executive orders.
Yeah, and there's a balance here, because we want to be holding Trump accountable to the promises that we like, and we want to be downplaying the promises he's made that we don't like, that we hope he doesn't keep.
Yeah, no, totally.
But it's I don't really like this narrative of Trump has gotten so much done right away that's so meaningful, because I'm a little bit unconvinced that these executive orders are going to mean the completion of all these, I guess, but they are statements of continued intent at the very least. He's got something that we should remember for the future, which is that when it comes to campaign promises and fulfilling them, a theatrical approach is appreciated by by the media and the people.
The last thing that he said / did, this was an executive order, it was just a tweet, but I also wanted to talk about it, was that, quote, if Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, 228 shootings in 2017 with 42 killings, up 24% from 2016, I will send in the feds, ! So he tweeted that out, and people are like, what does that mean? You're going to send in the feds? Like, we're talking about martial law. We're talking about like sending the FBI and SWAT teams into the city to prevent murders. Like what exactly are you talking about? And I also saw this thing that he tweeted this just literally right after the O'Reilly factor on Fox News listed those exact same stats in the same way. And O'Reilly called for the quote feds to intervene and stop the quote carnage. So he just saw Bill O'Reilly saying, yeah, we need the feds in here to stop this carnage. And he was like, I'm going to tweet that out. If they don't stop the carnage, I'm sending in the feds.
I can't remember who was telling me this, but someone was saying that some Trump aides have complained that Trump wants to watch too much TV.
The Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington has filed a lawsuit against the president on Monday, claiming that his failure to divest himself legally from his business interests violates the emoluments, I have no idea how to say this word, emoluments clause of the United States Constitution, which prohibits government officials from accepting payments or gifts from foreign governments. The lawsuit alleges that any payments made to Trump's hotels, office buildings, golf courses, and other businesses by foreign government officials stands in violation of this constitutional clause. And finally, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the White House on Tuesday evening, continuing a week of nearly constant protests against the new president. When I wrote this, I was on Wednesday, but there was also more protests last night, Wednesday night, in Washington, D.C., and there was also protests today in Philadelphia where Donald Trump was speaking to the GOP. The Women's March, which was held in cities across America and around the world the day after the inauguration, drew 600,000 protesters in Washington, D.C., and with a total of over 5 million people across all major U.S. cities combined. On Inauguration Day itself, hundreds of protesters, many dressed in black, attempted to disrupt the inauguration and events surrounding it. Though their actions were mostly contained by the police, they did manage to achieve some minor property damage, including setting a limousine on fire and also notably punching alt-right figurehead Richard Spencer in the face. 230 people were arrested, and of those, 217 were charged with federal-level felony rioting, which, if convicted, is punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a fine of $250,000.
Today on a Confirmation Bias News special report, one Nazi has been punched in the face one time. We go live now to the reaction.
You know, my mother always taught me that punching people is wrong. Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter how much you disagree with them, you don't punch.
What if my white son grows up to be a Nazi? Will you punch his face? That's not right. Breaking news, there is a candlelight vigil of thousands of liberal Democrats out in the streets for the Nazi and his hurting face.
Say what you will about his views, at least he puts them forward peacefully. It's just, when I hear about people just trying to express themselves and getting punched in the face, you know, it's like, what country are we even living in anymore?
This just in, I am being told that a Kickstarter raising money for that Nazi has now passed $2 million. That money will go towards facial massages and moisturizing creams. So this brings us to the question, sincerely, of is it okay to punch Nazis? Is it okay to punch white nationalists? Is it quote okay, or whatever that means? It's such a funny question because, like, I've seen more than one headline about with the phrase, like, is it okay to punch Nazis?
Yeah, there's flowcharts, there's websites that have been set up.
Okay versus not okay, whatever that means. But it always has to be against something. You can't just talk in general terms of, like, if you want to say, is it morally good to punch Nazis? That's a little bit different than, is it okay to punch Nazis?
Is it effective to punch Nazis? Is it effective at what? Is it effective at
what are the results of punching Nazis?
Like, have we achieved some collective catharsis of all the people who have been terribly frightened and upset about the rise in white nationalist rhetoric in the United States? I think there was some collective catharsis there. I think a lot of people have really enjoyed this punch. I've seen a lot of edited videos of it. I've seen a lot of it's set to various different music songs, a version where sonic rings popped out of him when people punched him.
That made me laugh.
So they're like, it's definitely effective in that sense. It was effective at some kind of catharsis. It was effective at starting conversations about whether it's okay to punch people.
Yeah, and kind of like the limits of discourse, like what constitutes violence and what's a proportionate response to. Is a single punch to the face really an escalation from months and months and months of agitating for, quote, peaceful ethnic cleansing, where a racially segregated national identity is this guy's MO?
Yeah, I have a really hard time making the case that it's a major escalation or that it was like a major breach of his free speech, which is a strange argument.
Yeah, and it's a really funny argument. But I mean, have you ever been punched in the face for words?
No.
I have.
I've never been punched in the face, period.
I think that you can only really have an opinion on this issue if you yourself have been punched in the face because you were being an asshole. So I do have a right. This is my lane.
Be quiet.
This is my lane, and
I'll stay out of it.
When I got punched in the face for being an asshole, the guy who punched me was also an asshole. Probably.
But you were legitimately being an asshole?
Yeah, I was. The basic context, I was pretty drunk, so I don't know exactly how much of an asshole I was being. Actually, I do know. It was very, very asshole. He was being a dick to my friend, and he's like made fun of her accent or something. She's from the UK. And I was really drunk and high on being surrounded by my friends. And I just started like tearing into this guy about like personal stuff, attacking his appearance and how he looked and acted and making guesses about his life and stuff. And then he sucker punched me in the face. So having been punched, I can say that guy was an asshole. But also, I mean, like, I kind of deserved it. I don't think like it was some big affront to my free speech. I don't think that should be part of a process of me and that guy having continued escalations or something. What it actually signified to me at that time in that context is this conversation's over. You know, like, this guy's not willing to participate on the realm of like making fun of each other. He's just getting he punched me. I continued making fun of him as he left, and like people held us apart because I was powerless to do anything else except just keep on going. So I think there's a couple lessons to take from this example. First of which is that people get punched in the face for being a piece of shit all the time. It's not really news. The other thing is that being punched in the face did not make me shut up. And if anything, it made me more vociferous in that guy was a piece of shit. And some of the things I said to him afterwards were actually harsher than the stuff I was saying before.
So yeah, there's narrative that it's going to make him, like, I've seen some quotes from him about how he's scared to go outside now and scared to talk in public, and people are sharing this quote over and over again about how this means that punching him was effective in somehow silencing him.
Yeah.
But if you check his Twitter account, he hasn't been that silenced. He's been talking a lot. He was just on the Gavin McInnes podcast, which I wanted to listen to, but apparently cost money to listen to. So I will not be listening to it unless I can find it for free somewhere. If anyone has that, please send it to me. Send an MP3 to the podcast. I want to listen. Yeah.
So an example that people keep on giving is like in the punk scene in the 90s, there was Nazi punks coming to punk bars and like causing trouble, and what eventually seemed to make them leave was people actually physically attacking them and showing them that they weren't welcome there. So that's talking about keeping Nazis out of a physical space. And if you want to keep Nazis out of a physical space, punching them in the face as a group supporting each other in that type of self-defensive violence is a good thing. But right now we're fighting Nazis in ideological space, and that's a little bit different. And this doesn't mean I'm saying tut tut, don't ever punch anyone in the face. Like the amount of tears that I have for someone getting punched in the face one time is very small, and that's assuming they're not a Nazi. Like getting punched in the face one time is not the end of the world. I think because of its meme qualities, the reason that it's such a the debate is also about like our response to it and all that stuff, more than just the original punch.
This is something that's been brewing under the surface in leftist circles, and what you could vaguely call a like far left versus liberal discussion, whereas the quote unquote liberal position would be like, don't punch Nazis, be nice to people. And the quote unquote far left position would be like, yeah, punch every Nazi you can find as much as possible. I feel like this tension was brewing under the surface, and this incident allowed it to break out into the conversation in a way that it hadn't yet or hadn't recently with this specific example.
Mm-hmm. The liberal left spectrum is kind of known for calling people Nazis when they're not literally National Socialists or even white nationalists.
They could be leftists.
I've even seen discussions of leftists being like, we all agree that punching Nazis is good, so what do you say we also punch liberals, people who aren't leftist enough and give cover to Nazis?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's like a joke, they mean well and stuff, but when I see that, like, it's like, oh no, like, fuck you, like, you're ruining it for all of us. Like, this narrative that we can punch Nazis is already quite fragile. We can't expand that to, and also we can punch anyone who isn't critical enough of Nazis.
And also there's a very real tendency among quote unquote liberals to call people on the far left Nazis, like the feminazi narrative, or the SJWs are authoritarian just as bad as Nazis narrative. So pretty much everyone falls into the Nazi box according to someone's definition of who is a Nazi, which I just think is hilarious, because if you say it's okay to punch Nazis and we don't have to narrowly define Nazis as National Socialists, then it opens up the who can be punched category to everyone, basically.
Yeah, because either you're a liberal, you're giving cover to Nazis, you're basically a crypto Nazi, or you're a conservative, you've got some similar ideas to some like nationalist ideas, you're a Nazi, or you're a far leftist and you support the use of violence in the streets to suppress ideas that you don't like, and that itself is fascist.
Makes you a Nazi.
If you're a communist who has, kind of like support for historical communist projects that were authoritarian, then there's the horseshoe theory version of like, now you're a Nazi because you supported Stalin. No one is free from the labeling of, and this is something that I've thought of before. It's calling the omni critique, that no matter what you do, there is some perspective that there's some way you can be boxed in from another perspective of some kind. Like when I've found when I'm trying to navigate several points of views at once and say something that's palatable to more than one person, you get these really hard intersections where it's like, okay, like you must fall on one side of this one way or the other and alienate this group of people and be open to this critique from this angle. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the Nazi example is a good example of that, because I don't think there's anyone who there isn't a case to be made that they're a Nazi.
Yeah, and I mean, like, well, one thing I'm really hoping that we can kind of agree on is that, okay, punching someone in the face is one thing, but shooting people is another thing. And just like that guy who was shot at a protest against an appearance by Milo Yiannopoulos in Seattle. The details on this are pretty sparse. What you hear from reports there was that this person was trying to de-escalate a conflict that was starting to turn violent and somehow found himself in the way of a bullet.
The comparison between the shooting at the Milo event in Seattle and Richard Spencer getting punched in Washington is interesting, because it happened on the same day, but the responses were so different. Because when I first heard about the Milo shooting, I heard a bunch of misinformation, and it seems like misinformation is really common still on the right, that this was a shooting that was perpetrated by a leftist against another leftist. even as more evidence has come out about who the shooter is, they were there to see Milo. They lost their Make America Great Again hat at the event.
And asked Milo on Facebook to give him a new one that was signed. Yeah, there was a post from him on the Milo event page.
Yeah, and this was in the hours leading up to when he shot a leftist in the gut. So, and that almost became like there was so much conflicting information about that when it first happened that it was kind of like a wash. Like it wasn't clear what was happening, which side was in the wrong or anything like that. But then there was also at the same time this image of Richard Spencer getting punched in the face by someone wearing all black.
Yeah, because that's on video, so that's different.
Yeah, but what it comes down to is that what makes the meme work is knowledge of who Richard Spencer is. So in order for that to be funny, more people need to learn who Richard Spencer is. And Richard Spencer needs to become more prominent. Whereas this leftist who was shot in the gut, he's in critical condition. He, last I heard, he's in a real risk of like long-term damage or I think death.
I think I read something that said he was kind of out of the woods on death, at least. I'm not too sure though.
That's good. But because the proportionality is so different, where like Richard Spencer got one punch in the face because he's a fucking asshole, and a peacekeeping leftist at a Milo event got shot in the gut and almost died. And then the story is this media, like the story is Richard Spencer getting punched. It's really kind of fascinating how much it's trended in that direction. Even like the way I've been thinking about this, I got totally sucked up into the Richard Spencer Punchgate thing, and I didn't think very much about that Milo event until a couple days later when more information started coming out.
And also, the guy who shot him surrendered himself to the police the day after or 2 days after, and was released pending further investigation, even though it seems like pretty clear that this was the person who shot him. So that's kind of strange. And people have been saying that this proves how the police are aligned with white supremacists, but I think that it's probably more complicated than that. And also, apparently the person who was shot has issued a statement saying that he doesn't want there to be any charges pressed, and he would prefer to take part in a restorative justice action with the person who shot him, which just warmed my heart to many degrees, because it just feels like there's so many leftists nowadays who aren't down with the restorative justice anymore. And
yeah, man, and people will still come away from all of this and be like, the lesson of this week is that leftism is way too extreme and violent, and they need to be suppressed.
Right.
Like the takeaway from this week is
a right-wing person shot a left-wing person. A left-wing person punched a right-wing person, but one of those is worse than the other one.
And a group of left-wing people broke a window and broke the windows of a limo and set it on fire.
Yes, that also. And the response by the left-wing person who was shot was to say, let's do some restorative justice. I don't want the state getting involved. The response of the right-wing person who was punched was, Richard Spencer has called for an alt-right vigilante force to be formed on Twitter, saying that if the state isn't going to protect them, they're going to have to protect themselves. So that was his response. And yes, the narrative forming out of all of that is left-wing people are violent. It's just like, okay.
And something weird about this moment in history, too, is now that Alex Jones backed Trump and Trump won, and Alex Jones is backing the government now and thinks the U.S. government is smashing the New World Order and all this fucking glorious stuff that I don't know if you've seen anything from him since Trump won, but he's just fawning. It's crazy. I watched it the other day. He just completely like everything Trump does is perfect. It's like exact opposite of a conspiracy theorist. It's like, because Alex Jones is caught up in this fucking belly rubs for Trump mindset. There's no one pointing at, what if this is a false flag? What if Richard Spencer getting punched in the face was set up by elements of the far right? I've seen it suggested in comment sections, like maybe him touching his pin was like the signal to come and punch him or whatever.
Right.
We don't know who this person is. They're using black bloc, Antifa type stuff to manufacture a situation that's beneficial to them. To consider the possibility that Richard Spencer and his attacker are, even if Richard Spencer isn't aware of it, are in cahoots and represent the same force and the same pattern. That discussion doesn't seem to be happening anywhere, because the king of the conspiracy world, Alex Jones, who would call anything a false flag, if fucking...
Yeah, at the drop of a hat.
No matter what happens, it's a false flag in Alex Jones' universe. But now that Trump won, that narrative isn't being aired in the same way. I just find it really fascinating that Alex Jones has turned into an establishment mouthpiece in a way.
It's up to us. It's up to us to put that narrative out there.
That's exactly it. You couldn't ask for a better recruiting video. You know, you really couldn't ask for a better scenario for
the alt-right.
For white nationalists. Nationalism. The avatar of like, these ideas are being attacked. People can't address the ideas. They punch him, and then look at them celebrate his punch. And I don't know. It's suspicious. Sus. It's sus.
Ugh.
And if we got to become the new Alex Jones, we will.
I think it's a symbolic act, and it was a statement. And I think the amount that it's been shared around just kind of shows how much of a statement it was. Like, writing "fuck white nationalism" on your Twitter, tweeting out those 3 words is one thing, but punching a white nationalist in the face is saying that with so much more vociferousness.
Well, and like people who would say that this is going to lead to more violence. Like, there might be some truth to that. This isn't the beginning of political violence, though. This isn't the first, like, the right wing and left wing. We've been peaceful for millennia. And then one day leftists got out of control and threw the first punch.
Right.
That's not what happened.
No.
So, like, I think it's okay to say, I don't support the punch. I don't like punching people. I don't like punching people for ideas or whatever. And so say that's my point of view. That's different than saying, punching people in this way is so bad that anyone who does it is my enemy, and I'll undermine that. Like, in the example of, I know who punched Richard Spencer. It's this Antifa guy I know. It's okay to not support punching Richard Spencer, but the real heart of, like, I think the real people are really fighting over this issue is because they don't want you to snitch on that guy. I just drawing that slight difference between talking openly about your point of view. If you're critical of violence, I think having this complex discussion of what the outcome is going to be, what's the situation that led to it, what should we spread as the barriers to discourse, like where punching becomes acceptable is a statement to say we don't go that far, we don't say that.
All good conversations to have.
Yeah, I want to have those open conversations, but I also want to encourage a type of solidarity where we're not going to sell out people who have engaged in tactics that we don't agree with. And I think that's a big part of it, especially when you're fighting an organized group of people who represent a real threat of harm. Then I just think that's an important distinction to draw. Like, yeah,
definitely. Also, I saw someone on Twitter who was, just still even yesterday, very involved in discussing this constantly, and was blocking anyone who disagreed with the idea that it was good to punch Richard Spencer and that it was effective and it worked and it made Nazis afraid and we need to do more of it. And anyone who was kind of tweeting at him disagreeing with any of those premises was getting blocked. And obviously they're not going to collaborate. And this is a person who, I don't know who they were, but they were getting $3,000 per video they were making on Patreon. I'm not going to say who it was, but just, you were talking about blocking collaboration with the people who punched or the people who supported the punch. And I also don't think we need to block collaboration with people who have some reservations about either whether it was right to punch or whether the punch actually achieved anything positive.
Everyone you interact with has got this very strong cultural conditioning towards nonviolence, de-escalation, this type of stuff. And it's not necessarily something that we should loathe, that people have a tendency towards not wanting to hurt each other.
Yeah, it's a good thing generally.
But then it's also, it's fun to, if you're radical, it's fun to dunk on liberals and be like, haha, you guys are dumb. I get things you don't. And like, I get that. But
yeah, I'm not saying never make fun of them, but like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I feel like we've talked about this for too long.
I feel like everyone's talked about this for too long. Hey there. We all know that Nazis are bad. And we all know that punching Nazis is good. But what if I told you that Nazis don't act alone? Nazis always have accomplices. And one of the most prominent types of accomplices are called liberals. Liberals will let Nazis do whatever they want. They'll let them step all over you. And when you punch Nazis, the liberals will try to throw themselves in between you and the punch and say, no, no one deserves this. We need to not just fight Nazis. We need to fight all liberals. So that's why I've started a foundation, the Foundation for Punching Liberals Who Enable Nazis by Not Allowing Others to Punch Nazis. We're the proud sponsor of today's Seriously Wrong.
There's been a lot of talk recently about punching Nazis and about whether or not it's morally justified. But I think we need to step back a little bit and think about just who are the real Nazis. Is it, on the one hand, people who read and espouse Nazi propaganda in a totally peaceful way? Or is it the people who punch those people? When I think about Nazism, I think about violence against the innocent, and I think about the pain of living in a repressive society. And that's why my organization is in favor of punching the people who punch Nazis, because they're the real Nazis. Because right now, they're punching quote-unquote Nazis, but any day now, they're going to be punching you, me, your kids, teachers at your local school, all of us. We got to get out in front of them. We have to punch them. Anyone you see punching someone else for being a Nazi, you punch them. Brought to you by Concerned Citizens for Punching the Real Nazis.
Hi there, I'm from the Institute for Punching People Who Didn't Let You Punch Nazis.
And I'm from Concerned Citizens for Punching the People Who Punch Nazis.
We've decided to put aside our petty differences today and stop the needless squabbling over super inflated wedge issues to have a
common ground,
united front on something that I think we all agree on, punching in general.
It's useful. It's a way of expressing yourself. It's a way of hurting someone else. It's a way of acting out your anger so that everyone can see and see how impressive you are.
And if you get punched, are you going to take that? Or are you going to punch back? Which is not taking that anymore, which is the bad thing. You know what we say at Punching in General is punches beget punches, and we support that.
And the very best part is that anytime you punch anyone, they stop being the thing that you punch them for and become like you. So if you want everyone to agree with your political opinions and get on the right moral side of history, my side of history, give them a punch.
Punching in general. It works.
All right. And in Canada, there's been some news too. Nothing maybe so fun to talk about as punching, but 200,000 liters of crude oil was spilled onto agricultural land after a pipeline leak in southeastern Saskatchewan on land owned by the Ocean Man First Nation. Greenpeace has criticized what they say is a slow response from the province to the leak, but the province has defended its actions, saying that 170,000 liters of the oil has already been recovered and the contaminated soils are being removed as we speak.
That fucking sucks.
Yeah. Justin Trudeau has been like defending the tar sands recently in some town halls in Alberta. I saw some footage of it. People were like yelling at him. There was this guy with the Make America Great Again hat on in Alberta yelling at Justin Trudeau for not being pro tar sands enough. And Justin Trudeau was almost like yelling back, being like, I am pro tar sands. I've been pro pipelines. We're going to build this other pipeline. And like, I don't know, silly things. I guess maybe silly is the wrong word. Also, in another First Nations related story, the Federal Court of Appeals has dismissed a case from two BC First Nations challenging the proposed Site C dam project along the Peace River in northeastern British Columbia. This appeal dismissal clears the way for federal government to issue permits on the project. The First Nations had been arguing that flooding 5,000 hectares of the Peace River Valley to make way for the hydroelectric project infringes on their constitutionally protected treaty rights. And the Federal Court of Appeals basically said, we can't decide that. So it would have to be brought up in some other way, a lawsuit or something, I think. But by dismissing the case, the federal government can just do it without waiting for any lawsuits to happen or be settled. BC Hydro and the BC Liberal government say that the dam is needed to provide a source of sustainable, clean energy in the province. And the last Canadian story I have, which isn't really news to anyone, least of all us, but it gives us a chance to briefly complain about things. An international survey has found that Vancouver's housing market is the third most unaffordable in the world, topped only by Hong Kong at number 1 and Sydney, Australia at number 2. So
wow,
we're
world-class city.
Third worst, top third unaffordable city in the world.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely is. That matches my experience.
It is unaffordable. It's hard to live here.
I had once had some really nice rent, like 8 years ago.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was pretty killer. I had a room for $300 a month.
Nice.
Just on the edge of Vancouver into Burnaby. So
and like a whole apartment or just a room?
Oh, just a room with 2 roommates in a basement suite underneath my landlord.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, but yeah, still a 3-room apartment then, or 2 roommates in 1 room, like a couple?
A 3-room apartment
for $900. Eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, since then, it really seems to bottom out at the least rent that you can pay. Generally, is like $550 in a 2-bedroom.
Yeah, maybe. I was looking for 2 bedrooms. I guess it depends. If you move further out from central locations, it gets cheaper. But anything around here, the cheapest 2 bedrooms I saw were like $1,400 to $1,800, with a lot of them being over $2,000. My 1 bedroom that we're sitting in right now is $940. Is going up to $970 next month, actually.
Wow,
losers. Do you want to, let's do a voicemail, a call. We got a call, some feedback on one of our last episodes with
it's from our hotline.
Yeah. We had a 1-800 number hotline, which is going to be discontinued very soon. But for people who do want to leave us messages and have those messages played on the show, because it's a lot easier now to play messages that we're doing these kind of grab bag episodes where we talk about different things and we don't stay on one topic the whole time. So we don't have to create a whole episode in order to answer your question. We can just talk about it for a little bit. And B, if you have comments on previous episodes, it makes a lot more sense in this kind of format to play them back. So if you do want to leave us a voice message, you can do that via Facebook Messenger. To message to our page is pretty simple on your phone if you want to do that. And also on the website, right below the contact form is a button. You can use any computer as long as you have a microphone. Just click record and leave us a voice message that way. It's super simple, super easy.
Brand new feature. Just trotted it out today.
Hey, Wrong Boys. So I have a question about all these specific days that seem to be cropping up. Like, for example, like the hot and spice day that the most recent podcast episode was on, this day, that day for diseases, even just like random monotonous things like sandwich day. And do you think that possibly corporations and people with strong media influence could potentially be creating these days as a form of sort of meta advertisement, where they get people to pass around hashtags and say this day for that, when actually all it's doing is, for example, in Canada, Subway was giving away free sandwiches on some arbitrary day because of Sandwich Day. Do you think that could possibly be constructed by Subway, the corporation? Or are these days cropping up naturally? And if so, how are they cropping up? Thanks, boys. Keep up the good work and love you both. Mwah.
Well, first, thanks for your question on this important issue. I think we want to start a little bit by talking about days in general, and we're going to swing back to answering your question more specifically once we've established context.
So I just looked up January 26th on Wikipedia, and today is Australia Day, which is seems like it's Australia's 4th of July, or like we have Canada Day, they have Australia Day. It's Engineers Day in Panama, so a day to commemorate engineers. It's also International Customs Day, and I tried to figure out what that means, but I still have no idea.
Is it just like the notion of having customs in general?
I don't know.
Or is it like a celebration of that part of the airport?
Yeah, it's like, or the border customs patrol. I have no idea. I tried to Google it and find out, and all I could find out was that it was listed as today, but not what it means. It's also Liberation Day in Uganda and Republic Day in India. So those are like, they're actually commemorating something. It's not like a sandwich day. I did also find out though that January itself is Awareness Month it's Alzheimer's Awareness Month in Canada. It is the Codependency Awareness Month in the United States. It's the Constipation Awareness Month in the United States. It's Glaucoma Awareness Month in the United States. It is Poverty Awareness Month in the United States. It is Self-Help Group Awareness Month. That's a global one. It is Stalking Awareness Month, like people being stalked. In the United States, and it is Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month in the United States. So
I can also see here that since we last released an episode, these days have transpired. International Cheese Day. That was on the 18th of January. On the 23rd, International Sticky Toffee Pudding Day.
Oh, I love that day.
Yeah, and actually that's a new one. It just started last year. 2016 was the first one. Also in the United States, within just the last week, National Popcorn Day, of course.
Oh,
January 19th.
Popcorn. I fucking love popcorn.
The day after that, January 20th, Cheese Day.
Distinct from Milk Day. You already mentioned Milk Day, right?
Yeah, I did. Before we were recording, I did. Oh. That's in June, so that didn't happen in the last week. I was actually going to keep that secret till June.
Well, good, we spaced those out. You know, one's in January, one's in June.
June 1st is World Milk Day. January 22nd is National Hot Sauce Day, which is a little bit after International Hot and Spicy Day. If you like to double dip, I know I do. January 23rd, National Pie Day. That was started by the American Pie Council. And January 24th was National Peanut Butter Day, which is just an American celebration of peanut butter, which, again, started by the National Peanut Board.
So those national organizations, swinging back to the caller's question, are probably funded by the peanut butter industry to some extent, I think.
Yeah, they've definitely, at least peanut regulation in the United States government has got a revolving door to the peanut industry. So I think it's very unlikely that there was no corporate influence at all in the creation of all of these days that we're talking about. But also, I think there's a trend here that when you look at, for example, that June 20th could somehow be National Vanilla Milkshake Day and National Ice Cream Soda Day. There's no accountability for this process. You can just willy-nilly make any day you want.
Yeah, we should start creating some days.
Yeah, like, do you want to make
just launch a website?
Seriously Wrong Day? Sean and Aaron Day?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I feel like it's got to be something like
Lamp Day.
Brighten our lives. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, people do just love commemorating things, and they love making days feel special. If you're the owner of a large corporation and you can take that human tendency and use it to the advantage of your profit, I think that's reasonable. I don't know if there's like a vast conspiracy to like, oh, we're going to create these days and it's going to be...
Yeah, you don't
like you hear like the idea that Valentine's Day is just a corporate excuse to sell chocolates and sell cards and force people to, you hear this about Christmas too, to force people to buy things they don't need. It's all a corporate conspiracy. And I don't think it's ever that simple, but I do think there's definitely aspects of that are true.
Okay. I'm sorry, United States. You can't make Christmas Day National Pumpkin Pie Day.
Oh, those fit together.
It's already Christmas.
I don't know. I think I'm on board with that one. I love these days. They delight me. I love that it's different days all the time.
So yeah, I think that there's definitely a corporate influence here, and there's a use of this in marketing, but it would vary a lot from day to day. And I think that our social regulations for what becomes a day and what doesn't is completely dysfunctional. So there's definitely a big open door
Should
for
there
corporate.
be a vote or what?
I don't know. I don't have an alternative
I'd
system.
vote in favor of every day. Every single one that's proposed. Well, maybe not like National Murdering People is Good Day or something. I would be against that.
No, that'd be a terrible day.
Yeah.
I wouldn't celebrate that.
Or Celery Day. Fuck celery,
yeah,
man.
Don't fuck with me. You know I love celery. Celery is my shit. Celery is the best vegetable.
It's the worst vegetable. It's funny because I think we both had these opinions. Like, this isn't some made up thing. Like, I actually hate celery. Yeah, and you actually really love celery.
I love celery.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why the podcast is so dynamic.
Get opinions from all sides. So yeah, thank you again, caller, for this question. And if anyone else has questions or comments for us, we're going to be a lot better about playing them and responding to them. So head over to that website. The actual button on our website is at seriouslywrong.com, SRSLYWRNG.com/contribute. That's where our contact form is, and that's where this new voicemail messaging computer system also is.
So ask some questions. Hold us accountable for what we're saying.
Yeah, tell us what we got wrong or right or whatever, please.
So which do you think is more quintessentially American? Punching Nazis or punching whoever the president tells you to punch?
I mean, it really depends what your idea of quintessentially American is. Shit, that's a hard one. Yeah, because I feel like probably I want to say it's punching Nazis, but it depends on what narrative you accept about what's American. Like, standing against authority and against bad people is punching Nazis, but standing against, like standing with your country in a sort of nationalistic sense would be whoever the president tells you to punch.
I mean, I'm cynical. I think punching who the president tells you to punch is more American, but that's because I don't think American is a positive term. If I wanted to use like a little bit of quasi-nationalism to sell the argument that we should stand up to the growing threat of far-right extremism in the United States, I'd definitely say that it was American to punch Nazis. But if I was evaluating the history of America, I might...
Yeah. I think that was the same dilemma I was facing. You explained it good, though. Breaking news. While you were just in the bathroom, I was scrolling through Twitter.
Oh, you have to tell them that? I'm embarrassed now.
You're a man who pees.
We told them I peed.
I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw this tweet. At it again. Actual comrade Shia LaBeouf arrested in New York after attacking a neo-Nazi. So people might have seen a few days ago, there's a live stream, He Will Not Divide Us. I don't know much about it.
I've actually been keeping up with this. He Will Not Divide.us. The basic idea is there's a 24-hour live stream, I think in New York, and the premise is that people go there and they just repeat He Will Not Divide Us as a mantra, as like an art project. But it's actually turned out to be a really fascinating art project because it sounded kind of culty at first to me. But I actually watched it a couple times, just like randomly live.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really powerful piece because sometimes I've tuned in and there's been a group of people there singing He Will Not Divide Us and like making up music and all like working together to create this beautiful song that only has the words He Will Not Divide Us. And then another time it was like the middle of the night. There was just one guy standing there by himself, just like repeatedly saying it. And then also, so it's this guy in the foreground being like, He will not divide us. He will not divide us. But in the background, there's like 3 or 4 guys talking to each other, 2 of which are wearing Make America Great Again hats, kind of lurking back and forth. And it's like this creepy, like the dissonance. He's alone. They're in a group.
Right.
By the time I finished watching, those MAGA guys had come up to the camera, said the N-word, called him a faggot, and left. And actually, the guy that Shia LaBeouf got arrested for pushing was one of the guys who was there that time I was watching.
Oh, so you've seen this thing already?
Yeah. So this guy is a group, is part of a small group of trolls who have been coming up, and this is the fascinating thing about the attention that the camera attracts. It's actually bringing conflict onto camera between these factions, even though it's obvious, like especially in New York, it's like the amount of anti-Trump people seriously dwarfs the pro-Trump troll. We'll say anything for attention people, but they're creating really real conflict by showing up and like coming up and saying racist shit to the camera.
Yeah. So like a few days ago, there was someone showed up in a Nazi hat, I guess that's what this article says. And there was a video I saw of Shia LaBeouf yelling, "He will not divide us," at him, like in his face, very loudly, very much like aggressively getting at him. And I guess today a guy showed up and was saying Hitler did nothing wrong. And Shia was arrested and charged with assault for pushing him, as you said.
Yeah, the guy that Shia had been yelling at in that first video, he went up to the camera and said 14, which is like a Nazi code number for white nationalism.
Isn't it 1488 or something?
Yeah, so 14 is "we will secure a future for our white children" or something like that. And 88 is "Hail Hitler."
Oh, okay.
So the two are connected, but but some people draw the line after 14.
Right. They only want to secure the future. They're not pro.
Oh, well, I want to secure a future for our white children, but I'm not a Nazi.
Well, I mean, I want to secure a future for all children, including white children.
How much would that be? 17? When people say 14, you respond 17. I want to secure a future for all children, including white children.
Oh, is 14 the amount of words in that sentence?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 17. Good on you, actual comrade Shia LaBeouf. This guy on Twitter supports you.
Oh, yeah, and the stream's going to be going 24 hours for the next 4 years.
Yeah,
so it's kind of an interesting. At first, I didn't like it, but I've been convinced by the more footage I see. I've been convinced.
Pro this project.
Yeah, I think it's good stuff.
All right, and finally, it is time for rapid fire world headlines. Some shit going down in the world right now. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm locked in. I'm wearing my helmet.
Do you remember this girl, Amanda Todd, who created her video pictures of her naked had been spread across social media, and she committed suicide in 2012, and had, like, before she committed suicide, made this video explaining what had went wrong, and like
was she
went
from
viral.
BC?
Yes, BC. The person who had taken her pictures was a Dutch man, Aiden Coban, and he appeared in court this week in charges of online abuse against 35 girls and 5 gay men from around the world, including Amanda Todd. And she was the one who killed herself, so she's the one everyone kind of knows about. Prosecutors allege that Coban would go online, often posing as a woman, persuading his victims to strip for him in front of a webcam, and then using the images to blackmail them. He also faces charges related to child pornography. People shouldn't do those things.
No, that's bad.
That's bad.
That's very bad.
We disagree with you, Aiden Coban. We take the hard stance against you.
But that type of stuff is going to be, unless we can really figure out a framework for dealing with that type of stuff that's consistent, it's like a new type of crime, right? It's like web-based blackmail.
Yeah, there was that Black Mirror episode about it recently. It was like really intense.
Yeah, it's an extreme version.
I'm also not a fan of a bill that has just passed the second reading in Russian parliament that would reduce punishment on domestic abuse charges against spouses and children that, quote, do not cause serious injury. If passed by the third reading and then signed by President Putin, it would make it so that first-time perpetrators of spousal and parent-child abuse would only face a fine of about 400 euros rather than prison time, which is the current punishment. Amnesty International has called the bill a sickening attempt to trivialize domestic violence, while proponents say that the current laws too harshly punish people for what are internal family matters.
So I'll start by saying the obvious, which is that domestic abuse is wrong and should have adequate, proportionate punishment.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, I'm in favor of, rehabilitation rather than punishment. Putting people in jail, I don't think is necessarily helpful anyway, but that's the system that exists. And so changing it so that it's like a ticket, it's like a $400 ticket. And granted, this is only for first-time offenders. I'm guessing that means if you're a multiple offender, there would still be potentially jail time, but I don't know. If it was really just an internal family matter and it was like not that big of a deal, then probably charges wouldn't be pressed, because you don't have to press charges. So if the victim of this crime was going to the police and wanting something to be done about it, a $400 fine just doesn't really seem like the right way to go about it. Maybe like anger management classes, some like how to not hit your wife or husband classes would be good instead. I don't know. Peace talks were held between Syrian rebel forces and the Assad regime in Kazakhstan. Iran, Russia, and Turkey were all present. The first day was reported as largely unproductive, with both sides trading jabs, the rebels referring to Assad's, quote, despotic regime, while the Syrian government referred to the rebel delegations as, quote, terrorists. The talks ended with Iran, Russia, and Turkey agreeing to continue to enforce the delicate 3-week-old ceasefire, while the Syrian rebels have basically agreed to nothing and signed no new deals. And while the Syrian rebels have basically agreed to nothing and signed no new deals, Turkey has called the talks a serious diplomatic success. So, I mean, it seemed like it was okay, but it's just kind of funny that the 3 countries who aren't really involved, it wasn't the government and it wasn't the rebels signing this agreement at the end. It was just these 3 other countries that are around there being like, we agree to a ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lifted restrictions on building new homes in East Jerusalem, approving hundreds of new domiciles in the area of the contested Gaza Strip. This comes just weeks after the UN passed a resolution condemning Israel's settlements in the area, and just days after the prime minister had a, quote, warm conversation with Donald Trump on the phone. So as people predicted with that UN resolution, it basically meant nothing, and Israel has now doubled down and agreed to lift restrictions and start building houses in East Jerusalem once again. And my last story is that Iraqi troops, with the help of United States backup and air support, have retaken the eastern half of Mosul. That is, I guess the city is cut in half by the Tigris River. So everything east of the Tigris River has been cleared of ISIS fighters and ISIS militants. Children this week were returning to school in the area for the first time in over 2 years since ISIS took over the area and closed down all the schools. They are preparing for U.S. and Iraqi forces are preparing actions to take back the western half of the city as well, and it seems like that's likely going to happen. It just probably going to take a while. They have to go through basically everywhere in the city and either bomb the ISIS people who are standing there with the U.S. Airstrikes, or kill them on the ground because they aren't running away. They're making it their last stand and suicide bombing and doing everything they can to hold the space. Also, video has surfaced on social media of Iraqi troops beating 3 ISIS suspects in the streets before executing them with rifle fire, and the Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has ordered a probe into these alleged human rights violations. Also, one other thing I saw regarding Iraq. I was watching MSNBC yesterday, and Rachel Maddow was playing this video that I guess has been circulating around on Iraqi social media. That is a 2.5-minute compilation of every time Donald Trump has said that we should take Iraq's oil, with Arabic subtitles. And he's actually said this even since being inaugurated. He said it on Sunday again, or Saturday.
He said
again.
It to the CIA.
Yeah, he said it to the CIA. Yeah, we might have another chance to go in and take their oil, is what he said. Like, we should have taken their oil and we might have another chance. Her take on this anyway, I don't know how much this is overstating the fact, but that this is extremely dangerous for the United States troops who are in Iraq, because the new president is basically saying, we're going to take your oil. And the people in this country are like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what? The Iraqi prime minister responded to this basically just saying, obviously they can't take our oil. This is our oil. She played the whole 2.5-minute video, and it's pretty, like, when you keep hearing it over and over again, repeated like that, it's very effective. And it's very, like, if that was my country and he was saying he was going to come take the resource that we rely on for money, I don't know, crazy shit times we live in.
I saw something interesting on Facebook. Someone shared it in one of our groups of Robert Reich, the former Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton. He posted basically a theory about Trump and the way that the Republicans see Trump. Basically, the conspiracy theory, the fake news that he put forward, is that they see Donald Trump as someone that is going to be impeached, that his impeachment is coming, it's inevitable. And what they want to do is get as much of their agenda, their very unpopular agenda, passed through Trump as quickly as possible. Give Trump all the blame for it. Trump is an egotist. He'll take all the blame. He'll be like, these are my ideas.
Yeah,
I stand by them.
Yeah.
He gets impeached over one of the laws that he's already broken or will break soon, inevitably. And they can move all of the blame of these policies they want to pass that are going to benefit their financiers, that will actually negatively affect the public. They'll be able to pawn off on this madman clown figure. He maintains, that it was the right choice and stuff, even after he's impeached, launches his Trump News media network about his own version of history or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
In their point of view, he's a useful idiot that they can quickly pass their agenda through without giving him too much keys, without giving him the nuclear codes, without giving him the ability to make strikes like that. And then they replace him with Pence, who's their guy. And then fill it out into a more regular administration after the period of time has passed where Trump has been impeached. And I thought it was an interesting theory anyways. Maybe it's just wishful thinking on the part of more respectable Republicans that they're going to be able to push him out.
They're hoping that that's the case, but might not actually happen.
But it does seem to me like with a lot of legal counsel, it's not for sure that Trump can go about his business without constantly breaking the law. Yeah,
I mean, he's already being sued, which I talked about at the beginning, for potentially violating the Constitution. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that he's going to do something obviously publicly impeachable. I don't think anyone could rule that out.
Oh, another interesting conspiracy theory that came out of, again, one of the Facebook groups we manage is someone was suggesting that the Republicans, Trump, Steve Bannon, this constellation of people, it's been predicted for years now that kind of the U.S. is on the precipice of civil unrest. I remember stuff like as early as 2011 or 2012 about the Pentagon talking about that being passed around the activist circles. The theory that one of the members of our group was putting forward is that they're aware of this impending time of civil unrest where a lot of things are going to be up in the air, and that through stuff like Trump, Breitbart, and InfoWars, they're loading up they're trying to make the civil unrest in their favor. They're trying to make a faction. They want to make sure that the civil unrest isn't a communistic, let's make the country more turn into a perfect utopia.
It has to just be reaction against reactionaries, basically. It can't be forward moving. It's just preventing the backwards moving of the...
Not only do they support what the president is doing, they just generally support the idea of rich people crushing poor people.
Yeah, might is right. Might makes right.
Yeah, and by seeding that, by putting this stuff out there, they're trying to set up the game board for when civil unrest happens, it benefits the ultra rich.
Did you have a inspiring quote? I think you mentioned an inspiring quote to end the episode.
Oh yeah, because I wanted to. We always like to end on a happy note because when you're talking about current events in a time such as this, we really picked a sad time in current events to...
Well, I mean, it's always... And current events are always skewed towards the interesting things, and the interesting things are skewed towards the negative things. you might have all noticed that I didn't have any funny, jokey news stories this week. It was because I just didn't see any that were that good. There was one where I felt like it was more of a visual gag, but like this British guy was told that he wasn't allowed to drive anymore because he was driving this really small convertible car, and he's like 6'7", and his head was poking, like he took the top down and was like looking over the windshield because he's so tall and the car was so small. And the judge ruled that in his ruling, the judge stated that it was really obvious that this guy was just showing off. And so he had his license revoked. But I feel like without the visual, it's not as funny.
So one of the spiritual gurus of our podcast is Buckminster Fuller, and I think this is an interesting and relevant quote when we're talking about organizing, not just organizing resistance against the bad things that seem to be everywhere, but also organizing a positive program towards what we want to put in its place. So a 10-year-old boy named Michael had written to Fuller asking him if he was a doer or a thinker. And here is a choice quote from Buckminster Fuller's response that I've always really liked. "The things to do are the things that need doing, that you see need to be done, and that no one else seems to see the need to be done. Then you'll conceive your own way of doing that which needs to be done, that no one else has told you to do or how to do it. This will bring out the real you that often gets buried inside a character that has acquired a superficial array of behaviors induced or imposed by others on the individual." So I'll repeat the key point here because it's a little bit muddled. Complex wording.
Yeah, he loves that.
Buck, he was a poet.
Yeah,
he was at least 40% poet, and sometimes it works against him. The things to do are... Buck, he was a poet.
Yeah.
He was at least 40% poet, and sometimes it works against them. The things to do are specifically the things that need to be done, that you see need to be done, that no one else seems to see the need to be done.
Yeah. So one thing I get out of that quote is like when you see things that you think need to be done that aren't being done, I think that can often make people feel a little bit despairing. Like, oh shit, why isn't this thing being done? It really needs to be done. But what it could actually make you feel is happy because now someone has noticed that this thing needs to be done and it's you, and maybe you can do it, or maybe you can encourage yourself and others to form a group to do it, or maybe you can even just advocate that it be done if it's the kind of thing that you can't just do on your own. But it's never a bad thing to have noticed something like that that's not being done, because it's the first step in it getting done. You can't solve problems that nobody has noticed are problems or that people think are okay.
It speaks to the individuality and spontaneity narratives that I really like. I love the idea that the things that you think need to be done that you can see that others can't are the things that you must do. It's just, there's something kind of poetic and structural about it. It like, I don't know, maybe it's just I've read the quote enough times that it's clicked somewhere in my brain that rereading it, I'm like, yeah, that's like good quote.
Right.
But something that you think needs to be done that no one else thinks needs to be done is the thing you should do. And then there's some other quotes of his that give a general idea of maybe how we could work together, how we could understand to work together. Here's another one. Take initiative, go to work, and above all, cooperate and don't hold back one another or try to gain at the expense of another. Any success in such lopsidedness will be increasingly short-lived. And I feel like this connects to the punching Richard Spencer thing, in that don't try to hold back one another or try to gain at the expense of another when it comes to Nazi punchers. Even if you disagree with them, don't try to hold them back. Instead, what do you see needs to be done? Do you see that there are white nationalists who are feeling hurt and isolated and maybe have some sort of, like, if what you're seeing is that white nationalists need some help and they need some compassion from someone, then that's your role. That's what you should do. If you see that white nationalists are going out in public unpunched and you think that they should be punched and it seems like everyone else thinks they shouldn't be punched, that is your role. That's what you should do. But in both of those cases, you don't need to kneecap each other in order to achieve your goals in fighting racism.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we were recording this episode, a report came out from Public Policy Polling that touches on some of the subjects we talked about, and it's just too interesting to pass up. They asked people, they did a poll both over the phone and online to ask people if they were in favor of punching Nazis. I fucking love the present sometimes.
Like the present day?
Yeah. 18% of people support punching Nazis, and it's about an even split between men and women, both polled at 18% support.
Cool. Gender parity.
There was also a Democrat-Republican parity. Republicans agree with punching Nazis.
Oh, good.
At the same level that Democrats do.
51%
are against punching Nazis, so a little over half, a sliver over half, and 31% are not sure whether or not you should punch Nazis. I might find myself in that situation if I was answering this question, not sure, because I don't like saying that I'm in favor. I mean, I am in favor of punching Nazis.
Yeah, I wasn't not in favor of this instance, definitely. My stock answer that I actually gave to a couple things was, it depends which Nazi and in what situation.
But you leave the door open.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just like,
yeah.
Just like the CIA director leaves the door open to torture, I leave open the door to punching Nazis. It also, punching Nazis is popular with young people. 35% of young people polled supported it. That's an increase of 17%.
Yeah.
And out of all races, punching Nazis was least popular with African Americans, who polled only at 11% in favor of punching Nazis.
And most popular with whites?
Most popular with whites and Hispanics. Whites at 19% and Hispanics at 22%.
Oh, also, Nazis themselves, we saw an article recently that pegged their numbers. If you're fairly broad with the definition and going by like online presences and stuff, about 50,000 of them in the United States. Like, again, like all white nationalists, not just self-identified Nazis. Richard Spencer isn't a self-identified Nazi. He was saying how he's not a Nazi when he got punched in the face. That's what he was talking about. But 50,000 people is about 0.015% of the United States population.
So, and assuming that estimate is wildly off and there's twice as many Nazis as this estimate, at most we're dealing with 0.03% of the population of America are this demographic we're talking about, punching or not punching. And then 51% of people want to protect them from punches. 18% want to punch them whenever they can. And 30% of people are, it depends on the context, or maybe I'm not sure. I don't know.
I need more info about these Nazis. Who are these fellas?
So we won't be able to build a mass movement on the subject of punching Nazis, or will we? Think about this. This same report also found that 17% of voters in America believe that most of the Women's March protesters were paid by George Soros.
So as we said, there was like 5 million across the United States, not counting the solidarity events in other countries. So conservatively, that means 2.6 million of these women were paid, or women and men. Obviously, it wasn't just women at the march, but of these people were paid by George Soros. I wonder how much he gave. If he gave them each like $100, that's like $260 million. I guess that's pretty. There's just
no way that George Soros paid most of those people. And he paid all the ones I don't know. So punching Nazis is more popular than the notion that George Soros paid all those protesters. However, George Soros paying all those protesters is a common trope in fairly mainstream right-wing media, Fox News, Breitbart, and then to a lesser extent, InfoWars. It's that spectrum of thought. It doesn't matter that not everyone believes it. It's still part of the strong base that makes up this voting bloc with 17%. 20% of whites who responded said that George Soros paid most of the protesters. And also, Trump got into office pandering to 0.03%. So you're telling me that Bernie Sanders can't come out right now in favor of punching Nazis?
Oh, yeah, he totally could.
I think he could.
Totally true. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks for your time and your attention. We appreciate your ear. And we'll be back next week with even more good stuff, further good quality stuff. Our website, seriouslywrong.com, SRSLYWRONG.com, and all feedback is appreciated. And I want to thank our new donors this week. We got I think 3 new donors in the last week.
Yeah.
So thank you for signing up, guys. We're gonna produce some amazing content thanks to your help.
Love you all.